Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are currently in a webinar titled How Can Parliamentarians Secure a Peace Dividend? Allocating for Peace. This webinar is organized in partnership with the World Academy of Art and Science and the Peace Bureau. My name is Arthur Duforest. I work with the Inter-Parliamentary Union, and I will be your technical host for today. We have the pleasure of having Ms. Laurence Marzal as the moderator. So without further ado, Ms. Marzal, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Arthur, and welcome all of you, esteemed members of parliament, distinguished panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you to the morning session of the IPU webinar, How Can Parliament Secure a Peace Dividend? This webinar will be more a conversation rather than a webinar as such. And it's organized in partnership with the World Academy for Art and Science and the International Peace Bureau. The purpose of this webinar is to look back at a time, well, similar in many ways to today, with new and uncertain in many others, where the world found itself engaged on the path towards conflict and how, amidst these times, politicians managed to develop what was then called the peace dividend. It's a term used to define the benefits of redirecting military spending towards essential social programs. However, while building consensus around the idea of a peace dividend may seem simple, doing so is often a long and complex road filled with economic, political, and security-related realities that need to be addressed. Parliamentarians are the cornerstone of this idea. Through their functions, they can ensure that a middle ground is found between the reasonable need for national security, the prerequisite to maintain a common front against pressing global issues like climate change, pandemic, or nuclear war, and the undeniable needs and aspiration of the population, which cannot be met solely by military security. With the recent release of the shared publication, Human Security and Common Security to Build Peace, the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the International Peace Bureau, IPB, and the World Academy of Art and Science, WAS, are helping put forward two approaches, human security and common security, contextualized to your work as parliamentarians to help bring forward the much needed change of a security paradigm away from war as a solution and towards a future where nations and people build security with each other rather than against. Today, we are honored to be joined by three distinguished experts. First of all, Mr. Gary Jacobs, who is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the World Academy of Art and Science, WAS. WAS is a forum for reflective scientists, artists, and scholars dedicated to addressing the pressing challenges confronting humanity today. What a program. Mr. Jacob is a pioneer in the field of social science, and his research led him to think outside pre-established ideas of human well-being, to consider and co-develop new ways of measuring social progress, like the Human Economic Welfare Index, for instance. His leadership amidst WAS and many other institutions and organizations have made him a true champion of the human security approach, which he continues to explore, promote, and develop. We also have with us Mr. Francis Dahoon Lee, who is the director of Peace Momo, a youth-led organization from South Korea, which has a mission to develop and provide peace education and facilitate training programs to equip the new generation of peace builders and foster, through the million of people they have reached, a true culture of peace. Mr. Dahoon Lee is a former professor for peace studies at Sung Kong Ho University, Ritsu Meikan University, and the International University of Japan. He's also a board member of the International Peace Bureau, IPB, where he continues to promote the common security approach, and notably through the recent IPB publication, Common Security in the Indo-Pacific Region. We also have Ms. Corazon Valdez-Fabros, who is a co-president of the IPB. So we have a lot of IPB people today. An organization often thought as the little sister of the IPU, as it was founded in 1891, so 2 years after the IPU. And IPB is an international organization that works from the belief that by reducing funding for the military sector, significant changes could be achieved for social projects domestically and abroad. Ms. Fabros, a lawyer by profession, works to address the roadblocks to peace at the root, and notably as a member of the steering committee of dismantling military industrial complex network. Her advocacy and activism has echoed beyond the Asia Pacific region and continues to inspire decision makers to act toward peace. Well, now that you know who will be talking, let me give them the floor. Gary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcel. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you, representing the World Academy, working with the IPU and the International Peace Bureau, both of whom we've been working on issues related to peace for some time, and we really value the association. For those of you who are not familiar with the World Academy, just a few words, so you may not wonder why we're here. The Academy was founded in 1960 by eminent intellectuals, including Einstein and Robert Oppenheimer, who, though they come from science, they were really concerned with the impact of science and technology on global affairs, and peace being at the utmost. And so this has been an issue before us for the last 64 years since we were founded. My own background and interest in this topic of the peace dividend stems back from 35 years ago at the end of the Cold War, when I was heading an international commission on peace and development, working with the UN agencies. At that time, of course, that's when the term really came into vogue, when Gorbachev and President Reagan took initiative to bring about and others, President Chancellor Kohl, to make some dramatic changes in the world. But it's often been lost sight of that in 1989, the global military spending at that time was an all-time record of about $1.3 trillion. And within 4 years, it was reduced by more than 300 billion. So the idea of a peace dividend, which many were skeptical about, took place in a very rapid time. And that money was channeled into positive relationships, more focus on addressing real challenges of people rather than this constant militarization, which had been going on for 3 decades. So we have a striking example, a rare example of how dramatic could be the change in a relatively short period of time. And that's where there were high expectations for it. Just to put this in perspective, as I'm sure most of you know, the Baku discussions on Azerbaijan on the COP29 were in a very heated debate over, can the countries agree on a target of $300 billion to address the climate change, though many countries were asking for something much larger than that, and finally came to a compromise at $350 billion. Well, that's about the money that was saved by the peace dividend 30 years ago, just by a reduction. So this has practical importance for us in a very different time that we are today. We're faced so much with violence and the rising spread of violence that it's hard to even think for most of us to think about, is this really a time we can talk about a peace dividend when we seem to be going so much against the direction of what happened in 1990? And how do we really make this real? And I guess my message would be not underestimating the obstacles. We need it more than ever before. We need it not only for peace, we need it for the survival and welfare and well-being of humanity more than ever before. Another $300 or $500 or $1 trillion a year can make all the difference in the world. And we recognize that we're starting from a different situation. And I'm going to share with you two strategies that the Academy has been working on, because we do feel this is a right time and an essential time to do something. The situation today, as I said, is very different. We all know it. In the last 5 years, rather than military spending going down by 3 or 4 billion, it's gone up by about 4.5 trillion, excuse me, that's more important, 4.5 at a time, sorry, 1 point, it's gone up by 400 billion. It's gone up by, which now at about $2.4 trillion, which is an all-time record. So it's more important than ever before. And therefore, it's worth us taking serious consideration as to, is this really reasonable? Is this feasible? How can we do it? How can we go about it? I won't go into how that money's being spent now, because we see it every day in the newspapers and on the, and we're all aware of the tremendous cost and hardship to people around the world, to security of people, to children, men, women, and all. To refugees. We have more than 120 million people who have been displaced, who are currently displaced around the world. These are huge numbers. So I'd like to talk about two strategies. The first is and all related to the role of parliamentarians and what role parliamentarians can play in facilitating investment, positive investment that can really improve and secure peace rather than fuel a greater spread of violence, as we have been seeing. The first of these is what the UN calls human security, an idea that was launched right after the end of the Cold War in 1994 by UNDP, recognizing that peace itself is not just an absence of violence. The foundation for peace is the security of human beings. And whenever that security is at risk, whether it's because of climate change or weather or famine, closely connected, or cultural interactions of different types, whatever the reason is, the more our sense of security goes down, the greater the tendency to violence rises. And we have that history. We've seen it all over the world, and it's going on in a very prevalent way today. By human security, what we mean is a focus on the real impact on people. Security, as it's referred to nationally, globally, is really the security of nation states or the security of borders. But we're talking about what is the impact on people: food security, health security, personal security, community security, environmental security, which is the greatest risk we have today in the world, is really not from weapons. WHO says the single greatest threat to human health in the world is climate change, which is fast coming upon us. So we have much more serious challenges before us today than simply those that come because of conflict and quarrels about territory or nationalism. That's how important it is. But for parliamentarians, the significance of this is that the message of human security is something that can resonate with everybody. because everybody's being affected by this, whether it's the economies or employment or health or food supply or energy availability. And that's very important for parliamentarians. Those are those who put us in office. They're the ones who we have to win their interest of. It's hard maybe to get them to understand often the wars that are going on the other side of the world. As an American, we have that problem with a lot of our citizens. Do we really need to be involved in a war somewhere else? But when we realize it's impacting on everybody, not just people there, it's impacting on the whole world, that's an important message for the electorate to choose their leaders, and an important reason for the voice that parliamentarians can have and the key role they can play with their constituents in shifting the investment from greater militarization to direct investments in human security, addressing poverty, inequality, social injustice, infrastructure, strengthening the healthcare system, education, and so forth. So this is a practical strategy. We've been working with IPU on it. IPU has adopted about 5-6 years ago now as one of the key messages, and is propagating this around. They've come out with a wonderful toolkit of human security and common security, delineating in great detail the practical steps and roles, thank you, Laurence, that parliamentarians can play in practically using this. And we had a webinar, we had a discussion conference in Geneva in March with a very dynamic group of parliamentarians who were enthusiastically recognizing this is the message we need. This is for us. This is our role. It's not just our governments. Our people that we represent have a key stake in this, and promoting human security should be an essential priority. The second one I wanted to mention briefly is what we call a peace offensive. And the word is actually something coined in the 1960s to indicate that in spite of the apparent, that was in the middle of the Cold War. And it was to highlight the fact that there are many things we can do to reduce the tension, to reverse the direction which we now see as a spiraling of tensions going from one place to the other, from Central Europe to the Middle East, and now now having repercussions in other parts of the world as well. And by a peace offensive, what we mean is the possibility to take unilateral acts to reduce tension between parties. And this not only refers to tensions between superpowers or between continents, or between, it means within countries, between populations that are in friction with each other, and local violence that's there, which we have in many countries around the world, as well as across borders as well. And the idea behind the peace offensive is that there are areas we can identify right now in hundreds of areas around the world where, without trying to change the entire political situation in the world, we can be reducing tension by addressing real human needs and cooperating in areas where it appears to be we've had long-standing conflicts. We're talking about issues that reduce conflict. It may be over water, of the use of rivers. It may be over access to rivers or ports or transport. It may be due to availability of power supply. It may be due to ethnic and religious things, certainly, but where we can come to some initiative. There's something we can do now. If you remember back to the early 70s, we had President Nixon inviting the Chinese to send their table tennis. He went on the first time an American president had gone to communist China, and then invited the tennis team over. Simple initiatives which helped reduce the tension. Many people are not aware that during the 1990s, when the accord was fought to reduce the tension between Israel and the Arab countries around it, President Sadat took initiatives to reduce the tension and came and spoke in the Israeli parliament. I'm giving it just there are hundreds of examples. I won't have time to do them. But all I mean by this is there are things we can do today, you can do as parliamentarians, to reduce tension by proposing unilateral initiatives which the other side can reciprocate. And in return for that reciprocation, a continuous exchange of confidence in building measures in incremental way. We've seen the violence incrementally accelerating. We want to incrementally reduce the tension for it. Using people diplomacy at the local level, involving youth. In the Middle East, we had in the 1990s the scientists. They created the Project Sesame, where nuclear scientists from all over the region, from all the countries, including Israel, were working together, and they have been for the last 30 years, showing that they could work peacefully. So it's a big subject with big opportunities, but I would urge you, when you go back, to look at the areas of tension inside and outside your country and look for what we can do to make a beginning in breaking the ice in going forward. And you'll find in the wonderful toolkit that IPU has published a list of examples of this where it has already worked effectively in countries in the past. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. And one of the take I have from what you just said is that people need to talk. They need to talk, they need to interact with each other. And that's really the start of building trust. I mean, you will trust those that you can talk with. So thank you very much. And now I turn to Mr. Francis Dahoon Lee, Director of Peace Momo, who will maybe need to leave earlier than the end of this webinar. Mr. Dahoon Lee, the floor is yours.
Morning, thank you, and good afternoon for those in Asia. Very happy to be in IPU seminar. Actually, for me, this is my first time. And I'm also feel privileged to have your document on human security and common security. I will definitely use it when I meet parliamentarians in South Korea. It's a very good. Here, I'd like to introduce another similar work jointly developed by, not just by IPB, but with many organizations, many professionals, and many advisors and practitioners in Asia Pacific. So Arthur, if you could please, can I share the screen from my side? Is it okay?
Yes, there you go. You should be able to do that now. There we go.
Okay.
We see your screen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is also from the similar background. We thought many people from China, South Korea, Japan, US, Europe, Philippines, Mongolia, India, Philippines, etc. We got together since 2 years ago and thought that situation was getting very, very dangerously in terms of arms race and more military spending and increasing antagonism, both in the public level and on the political leadership level. So we thought the situation was going quite seriously since 2 years ago in the region. And we thought we had to produce a report for the possible alternative vision and diplomacy. So very important part of this report is about alternative diplomacy, preventive diplomacy. So it has clear messages for parliamentarians and other decision makers. I'm happy to say that we had tremendous input from China side. Otherwise, in most of the cases, this was very difficult. So we had, this report is based on a continuous and stage by stage discussions with very somehow difficult partner to have communication. And then the main content is that basically two things: the danger of imminent military clashes are rising very fast in the region, and there are too many hotspots in this region. Some people called it Asia Pacific, but mostly from Washington and Tokyo, they call this region Indo-Pacific from their own strategic perspective. So in this region, there are too many hotspots, and additionally, these hotspots are all connected. So the imagination that there is a local conflict in Korean Peninsula and local conflict in Taiwan Strait and some other conflicts in South China Sea, this interpretation is not really well grounded. So these hotspots are connected. And another point which is not well known to the world about this region is that this is a concentrated region of the highest military spenders. Of US, of course, but Japan is increasing its military spending in a very rapid pace. And South Korea is a big spender. And compared to South Korea, DPRK, North Korea is very little spending compared to South Korea. China is a big spender, and Taiwan and an increasing number of Southeast Asian countries and South Asian countries are increasing their military spending. So in terms of military spending alone, this region deserves a real focus. So in the report, we dealt many topics, tried to be as comprehensive as possible. The global political changes and the nuclear threats and the Taiwan Strait issues and the Korean issues and the South China Sea and the vision of common security and its obstacles, and the relationship with climate change, and the role of small states and possible alternatives. And this report, I think, is also special because in the Asia Pacific, we can hardly find political leadership which speaks of alternative security policies. We can hardly find political leaders who are well aware of common security or other alternative security approaches, let alone human security. So that's the value of report in that context. And we thought is presenting this idea and principles of common security to the decision makers, the parliamentarians, and even to peace movement practitioners were very crucial at this time. To share with you just one aspect of the growing danger, as you know, the US annually spends about $900 billion in the military spending. And compared to China spends a little less than 300 billion. But do you know how much Japan spends? They are now about 70 billion US dollars, and it will increase to 100 US dollars very quick. And South Korea is about 50 billion, but it will increase to 70 billion very quick. Compared to that, DPRK spends about only 4 billion US dollars every year on the military. Russia spends about 75 billion US dollars only every year. And if we combine Japan, South Korea, US, and other military spending of the US allies, it takes up the highest military spending in all human history. And this is the region. And another thing is, when NATO does a full military training in Europe, the maximum number of military forces they can mobilize for military training is like 30 to 40,000. But here in Asia Pacific, when two countries like South Korea and US goes into war drills, they mobilize about 500,000 military forces every year. 500,000. That's the size of the military readiness and the military spending. And I'd like to highlight another fact which is not at all discussed in most of the parliaments in this region, is that the carbon emission, the greenhouse gas emission by the military is assumed to be the largest in this region, because this is where the military exercises are controlled and arms productions are concentrated, and there's no monitoring system, there is no law taken by any government, any parliament, to monitor the greenhouse gas emission from the military industry and military activities. And some of the non-governmental reports show that the greenhouse gas emission by military activities will be one of the top 4 gas emission in the world. And we have not devised any method to control this or even have statistics on this. So this report has come up with important 6 principles for common security, and we are going to use this as a policy guideline to policymakers and parliaments. But in a nutshell, I can summarize these key principles into 2 lines. Number 1 is, no security can be guaranteed by the decision or the efforts of a few countries. Security has always been guaranteed in a multilateral arrangement through negotiations of multilateral parties. So that's number 1. Number 2, when common security was emerged in Europe in 1982, there was imminent nuclear war dangers in the European continent, European land. But today, the danger of nuclear war is not singled out by other weapons. So our analysis is that these East Asian and the US, these countries are all leading in the high-tech military technology based on artificial intelligence. So Japan, South Korea, China, US, all these countries in Asia Pacific, they are leading in changing the warfare and changing the military weapon system in a fundamental way. So there is it's not so updated view to look at nuclear weapons as a separate system and artificial intelligence and automated weapons as a separate system. We think, many of the authors of this report think that the methodology of weapons and weapon system have gone to another level. So we need a new control and we need a new regulation. We need new negotiations. But in the region, we also lack properly working regional structures to discuss the security issues. So probably that's a number 1 step. So our appeal from this report will be eightfold. So we are asking people to engage in common security diplomacy. And number 2, we are asking decision makers to do actions to reduce tensions in Taiwan Strait and in the Korean Peninsula and South China Sea, and especially China Sea and the wider region. We need clear demilitarization and denuclearization. Otherwise, this would be the most dangerous hotspots in the world. And from the statistics of military readiness and military activities and military spending, when actual clash happens, the magnitude of that military clash will be incomparable to the existing clashes we see in Ukraine or in Palestine. And number 5, we are advocating to recognize the role of small states because Asia Pacific is full of small and medium-sized states, and their voices and their collaboration among themselves are taking more and more importance in international relations. And at the same time, today it is no more unipolar world. So there are many small international systems being developed. So this context that there are many international systems being developed by small and medium states means that small and medium states can play a crucial role in this transitional global politics. And number 6, number 7, and 8, civil society actors should work together with the decision makers, politicians, and parliamentarians to present alternatives to military alliance building, alternative to bloc formation, alternative to this, two different alignments. We cannot afford such divisive allocation of materials, resources, and worldviews anymore. So in a nutshell, similar to IPU's report, we are trying to say that common security, whether we use that term or not, that vision is really relevant in the Asia-Pacific region, and that's the only rational approach to restore our existence from many combined crises. And for parliamentarians, we are advocating that prevention should come first. So many more parliaments should engage in preventive diplomacy, and they should start discussing about the possibility and the visions of common security, which is based on multilateral corporations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Francis, and thank you for presenting that extremely interesting report. What I can see from what you just said is this request to commit to common security diplomacy. I would like to highlight that diplomacy is also one of the functions of parliaments through parliamentary diplomacy. So
That's right.
as I said before, the need to speak to each other, to talk to each other, is also something that parliaments can do. I mean, they can easily talk to their peers in other parliaments and try to reduce tensions. I see also that your report is focusing on the role of small states. And I have to say that at the IPU level, at least, we are more and more focusing on seeds, so small developing states, be they in the Pacific or in the Caribbean as well. And in fact, both these regions, with a lot of small states, share similar challenges and could easily share similar solutions, at least learning from each other and once again talking to each other. So this idea of speaking to each other, of building trust, of trying to find common solutions to shared challenges is something extremely important and that parliamentarians and parliaments can easily do. So I guess if you don't mind, we will be sharing your recommendations for the Indo-Pacific region, but I'm quite sure that they can be extended to the whole world as a contribution from your region to the rest of the world. Because I can see really that when you talk about ending wars, we know that there are wars in other regions, and they should be ended as well. And parliaments have something to do about that. When it comes to demilitarizing and denuclearizing some regions, that can happen in all regions of the world, I would say. So thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm now turning to Ms. Corazon Valdez Fabros. Ms. Fabros, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? That's
Loud
okay?
and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, because I'm having trouble with my audio a while ago. Anyway, let me begin by expressing our appreciation to the Inter-Parliamentary Union, as well as the World Academy for Arts and Sciences, and other organizations working together to hold this important gathering, particularly at these times of great danger and challenges to our very own existence in the world today. Of course, I'd like to thank the two speakers who made presentation before me, as it provides the context of what I would like to contribute today. Um, uh, Particularly, Francis have provided us a comprehensive presentation on the situation in the Indo-Pacific region, and providing us the key principles of common security, in which the International Peace Bureau have decided to also focus on as a campaign in the coming years. I thank the International Peace Bureau began its campaign to reduce military spending. Many years ago, I don't remember how many exactly. It began with our focus then on disarmament for development as the call within our peace education work over the years. And 10 years ago, December, the IPB announced the launching of the permanent global year-round campaign to tackle the worldwide issue of excessive military spending. In 2014, the world's governments spent over 1.7 billion on the military sector alone. This is money that could instead be spent on creating jobs for young people, feeding the hungry, and protecting us all from the effects of climate change and tackling epidemics. And much more, IPB has for several years called for annual reallocation of, as a minimum, 10% from the military budgets of all states, and for a process to be started to reduce arms production as well as the international weapons trade. Even this call of 10% reduction is a continuing discussion and study within the IPB membership and its networks. It's not an easy conversation actually, especially if we're talking with people in government. Given the context within which we operate and exist, this is not an easy call, as I said. Yet the call for reduction in military spending is a unity that we all build on, that has guided our campaign over the years. I would, of course, credit the CIPRI, for its important work on an annual report of global military spending. That is why when we hold the Global Days of Action, which basically now happens around April to May, it is timed at a date that includes the release of the report from CIPRI, which gives us an idea on how governments and countries have spent their resources on military spending. And of course, you all know that the trend has been really towards an increase, understandably, because there are so many conflicts that happen, not only in the region in where I am located at the moment, but also in other parts of the world. The Global Campaign on Military Spending, GCOMS, builds on over a decade of work done by IPD and others around the theme of disarmament for sustainable development. And particularly the Global Days of Action is meant to be able to share the information of military spending widely, which is important in terms of making people aware that not only because of the increase in military spending, but also that the rising military spending also have denied the resources to human needs. So IPV's concept of the five, we're looking at 5 directions in terms of how the budget, the money is released from the military budget. And we've considered 5 broad alternative areas. So we're looking at peace, disarmament, and conflict prevention and resolution, which, we all consider as human security as priority. We also look at sustainable development and anti-poverty programs. In that way, also, we're not looking at security only as the absence of shooting war, but also that the condition of poverty and insecurity is does not provide us or bring us towards sustainable development. Third, the public climate change and biodiversity laws for mitigation and adaptation. The fourth area that we look at as well when we talk about military spending is public services and social justice, human rights, and gender equality, which are often overlooked, and green job creation. These are areas that, of course, are not only relevant to the global south, but all over the world. And 5, humanitarian programs to support the most vulnerable groups. As we witness today, the increasing number of climate catastrophes, as well as the presence of internal refugees that are a creation or not only of the disasters that happen, but also because of government policies and wrong priorities. Of course, this is of course the all part of a wider global transformation towards a culture of peace. So when we talk about these issues at IPB, it's looked at as part of addressing the needs of people and prioritizing common security and human security as well. I would like also to express that IPU's work on this, especially in providing the human security and common security to build peace toolkit, is an important way forward addressing a particular branch of our governments that are often in a position of making laws and policies that provides the direction of governance. I'm not sure how it is done in parliaments, but in the Philippines, we actually have two branches of government, and these two branches of government provides the direction of governance, no? And the needed checks and balances that ensures that taxes and resources, which are people's money and resources actually, are spent and used to benefit the people and the country. Parliaments, Congress, that's how we call it here, have the power of the purse as it approves budget and investigates the allocation of resources in the different branches of government. So when we talk of military spending, it's usually within the budget of defense, no? Including intelligence and whatever related to it. And oftentimes there is lack of transparency when it comes to this. But Parliament, to a certain extent, can force the implementing body to provide information and investigate. In most cases, the capacity and power to investigate and approve budget allocations in all areas of government is there. And therefore, civil society or social movements use this venue and opportunity to look at how money is spent, but also to look at how budget is allocated, because that is where the authorization and the release of money happens. That gives the authority for the executive to use the people's money through its taxes. Of course, I appreciate Gary Jacobs, his call that this is the right time more than ever before. And I definitely agree with him as well as Francis for that urgency, for us to kind of use our capacity of organizing and really exposing what is wrong with the way resources are being spent. So how does the annual budget reflects the priorities? It is for human security. Is it for human security? Not only the which is, does not speak only of the absence of shooting wars. We ask the question, does it show priorities towards human needs and human rights, education, healthcare, and all other needs for human existence? For example, in the case of the Philippines, where the military budget is higher than social services combined. And we know that something must be wrong if the priority is given to military budget is much bigger than the priority given to social services and human needs. I appreciate as well that Francis have given us was it a summary or the content of the current report from the Indo-Pacific report. And I think I would like to say as well that the recommendations that came out of the Indo-Pacific report have its foundation from the core recommendations of the Olaf Palme Commission, which released its report in 2022 and of course IPB and other Olaf Palme Commission and other I think the um, and another organization that has worked together. And I like at this point by way of really making a summary so that the appreciation towards what was the recommendation coming out of the current Indo-Pacific report as the basis, coming from the Palme Commission, which formulated the principles of common security. And I think this has been very quickly also mentioned by Francis, that all nations have a legitimate right to security. A military force is not a legitimate means of resolving interstate controversies. Restraint is necessary as an expression of national policy. Security cannot be achieved through military superiority. And we've seen that over the years or centuries as well. Reduction and qualitative limitations of weapons systems are necessary for common security. And the links between these armament negotiations and political events should be avoided. That is like the summary coming out of the Olaf Palme recommendation of 2022, which actually have found its roots in June 1982. The Olaf Palme Commission of the Second UN Special Assembly on Disarmament, which made the following recommendation in its Palme report in 1982. Of course, you can find this in the Olaf Palme report and read through that, which actually covers a lot of ground, and of course it gave rise to a lot of initiatives or policies that have addressed the UNPEACE and the increasing armaments that happened, which includes the establishment of nuclear weapons-free zone in Europe, for example, the establishment of chemical weapons-free zone, particularly in Europe. And of course, the reason for for IPB and other organizations in coming together to come out with an Indo-Pacific report is to contextualize the content of the recommendations coming out of the reports, and at this point, I think I'd like to focus on a particular situation in Asia Pacific, which currently see a lot of what do you call this a problem, and I'm speaking about the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea problem. And at this, I think I need to mention that at this point, the Indo-Pacific report recently have come up with recommendations, And let me, by way of, trying to also for us to appreciate the recommendations based on the current context. First, China, Taiwan, and the United States must take coordinated action to lower tensions and avert potential war and demilitarize the Taiwan Strait, with a shared understanding that the ultimate solution of the Taiwan issue should not be achieved by military means. This is, coming from the region and specifically from the Philippines, where there is an increasing number of US bases, have put at risk not only the people of the Philippines, but also countries that have continued to lay claim to the areas. And second, for Taipei, following the One China uh, constitutional policy to manage cross-strait relations, which is we consider as crucial. To advocate the notion that Taiwan and China are two separate countries uh, uh, could be problematic, which we sometimes hear not only in the Philippines, but also in other parts of the region. Third, we feel that Washington playing the Taiwan card against Beijing is actually tempting to do, for, of course, including our government, but it is very risky. Supporting Taiwanese independence as a way to offend or irk China should not be mistaken for expanding economic and cultural relations with Taipei. And fourth, for Beijing, offering carrots is better than waving sticks in order to win the hearts and minds of the Taiwanese people. China must dial down military and diplomatic pressures on Taiwan and commit to resolving cross-strait disputes peacefully. And also in that sense, that there is a heightened concern on the part of the Filipino people, particularly those who are situated in the northern part of the Philippines facing the Taiwan Strait. Something that raises an alarm, and we do not want to see a possibility of a shooting war should it occur. So let me end with that, and thank you so much for this quickly put together presentation for you today, and I'm of course looking forward to a possible discussion after this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fabros. That was very interesting. Thank you also. I mean, you once again mentioned the need for countries to speak to each other, and their representative can speak to each other, as we mentioned earlier. You also mentioned, and that was very interesting, the role of Parliament when it comes to budget, and that's a very, very important role. And also the role of Parliament when it comes to oversight, which is like very near to budget at the end of the day. And I think that your intervention when it comes to oversight, like linked also to what Mr. Dahonli said, because you know that parliaments have the capacity to establish inquiry committees, and when it comes to the link between military spending rising and the rise of greenhouse gas, because military is a problem to the environment. I think that maybe this is something that some parliaments should be thinking of doing, because as Mr. Dahonli said, there is a lack of data. Parliaments can provide this data through their inquiry committee possibilities. So thank you very much. You also mentioned CIPRI, and for information, this afternoon we will be having a presentation from CIPRI people. So you know that we are organizing our sessions in 2 sessions. I mean, our webinars in 2 sessions, one in the morning, and I mean, at least in the morning in Europe, which is this session, and one in the afternoon, so that we are touching as many people as possible. And so this afternoon we will be discussing the same issue, but not with the same people. And Cypri will be one of the presenters. So I have plenty of questions for you, but we also have people listening to us. And rather than asking you my questions, I would rather propose that the floor, I mean, people that are listening to us would be able to ask questions if they have so, and if they don't, I have my own. So I see Patrick Schweitzer. Do you want to ask a question?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Patrick Schweitzer. I'm a student at the Geneva Credit Institute, and we are right now working together with IPU on an applied research project, and we try to examine how parliamentarians can contribute to common security, also based on the IPU toolkit Laurence has shown before. Thank you very much for the exactly this one. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentations we have heard about. And we also heard about the ways how human security and common security could be improved in Asia Pacific region, and also like the importance of this improvement in this region. And I have in my mind, for example, the Treaty on Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone as a foundation of common security. And my first question would be, could you maybe provide some other good examples which follows this direction of human security and common security in the recent time in the Asian Pacific region? And my second question would be about the peace dividend, about this concept. I mean, the first thing is the reducing of military spending, but the other thing, the very important thing, is the second step, the reallocation of the spending to social programs. And my question is, what are the obstacles for parliamentarians and how they can address them in this reallocation from military spending to social programs?
Thank you, Patrick. So Gary, Francis, Carson, what would be your answer to these 2 questions? Gary? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, there we go. I can try to answer one of them. I think there's often, my contribution would be to say, there are often times when we don't realize the power that parliamentarians have for taking resourceful strategies. It requires a certain creativity and out of the box. Often we're waiting for government to take the lead in things where it's not necessary. I'll give you a few simple practical examples to illustrate it. We were at IPU in March when we made a presentation on the human security, and right before that there was a session with a very interesting group of on IPU, including was moderated by a colleague of mine on the board of the Academy, regarding climate change and what parliamentarians could do about it. I'm giving a very simple practical example, and what they, among the many interesting things that they presented, was a global database of legislation that has already been done on environmental issues by other countries, which would be beneficial to those who haven't done it, who've already solved the problem. It may be sharing of water, it may be fuel efficiency or solar, it could be on anything. And there was a tremendous amount of interest in the room by the parliamentarians who didn't realize that there's something so valuable that could be exchanged from other countries. In illustrating the idea of a peace offensive between any two countries, if we look at something we have, something we know, or where we've been successful that the other where we're having tensions with doesn't have, that's the kind of area where a unilateral initiative could really attract attention. And I'll give you a practical example of this very briefly. Historically, I'm an American, but I've lived many decades and worked in India on development issues, and where I am speaking from now. In late 1990s, there was a unilateral military initiative by Pakistan against in the Himalayan region of India, which broke off all of the possibility of goodwill relationships for about 3-4 years. And the general, I'm not being personal, I'm just explaining the situation, the general who led the attack became the president of Pakistan. So the idea of relationships between the two was almost unthinkable. At that time, we took an initiative and approached both the governments. And we said, in fact, when we consulted the security teams there, they said it's impossible. Nothing can be done now. But when we looked at the possibilities for mutually beneficial collaboration in countries that have been so close together and know each other so well, we came up with a strategy that showed the potential for mutual benefit was so great that you could drop your defensiveness. And in a period of 4 months, I had the senior security officer in India saying, the things have changed now. Now the climate has changed. And we had Pakistan asking us to come there to talk to them about the possibilities, which was unheard of a few months earlier. And we had the chambers of commerce of both countries talking about having a meeting to identify the opportunities. And I'm just going to give you one example of it. When we met the foreign minister of Pakistan, the only thing he wanted to talk about is, if we make some reconciliation with India, will it help us develop our IT industry? And I said, we thought he was going to talk about military. Of course it would. You have the biggest IT training companies in the world in India, and they're anxious. They're going all over the world to train other people. It's their business. They can come to Pakistan and speak the same country and the same culture and do it, and they'll be so eager to do it. I'm just giving an example when we get out of the political fix and really look at the positive potentials that are there for initiative. We can be very surprised when we get out of the historical who did this and why we have a problem and how it's insoluble. And that's the kind of thing we're looking for, and we believe that exists many places in the world. In very unlikely areas, those who are closest may be best qualified to do so and know where we have a problem or where we have some strength that could be beneficially offered to others.
Thank you very much, Gary. Can I give you the floor, Francis, because I know you have to leave.
Yeah, I have to leave in 7 minutes, which is 90 minutes promised for this session. So please allow me. In Northeast Asia, the examples of common security efforts are very scanty, very rare, because still from Taiwan Strait to the demilitarized dividing line between North Korea and South Korea, it is still the old Cold War structure, division of two blocks, the continental forces and the Pacific forces, ideologically a very old style Cold War divisions still there. And if you remember Cold War strategies, the major thinking in the security sector is deterrence. So I would say Northeast Asia is the last resort of deterrence thinking, and probably the strongest thinking in deterrence is here. And Many of them are potentially nuclear weapons countries. Of course, South Korea, Japan does not have nuclear weapons yet, but in terms of money, capital, technology, factories, and materials, these are potential nuclear weapons countries. And there is a history that not only US bombed the nuclear bomb in Japan, but General MacArthur tried to bomb Chinese army during the Korean War with the nuclear weapons. And then from 1950s, US forces actually placed hundreds of nuclear weapons in South Korean soil without letting the South Korean government or any others to know. So from 1950s, there were nuclear armaments on this side, the southern side. And the war in Korea has not been resolved yet. So these conditions make it very, very difficult to present other ideas, other visions than the deterrence. So for us to promote common security, the first homework is to argue with and argue against the deterrence strategies. This is absolute mainstream in Northeast Asia, except China. And I think we need to study a little bit more about the change of Chinese foreign policies in recent years. They published very important foreign policy documents 2 years ago. And to my surprise and to many people's surprise, these three strategic papers by Beijing, they are based on the idea of common security. And no other governments in the region is trying to maximize that change, the change of tone in Chinese foreign policy. But I think this is a great opportunity. And we have very small examples. Mongolia single-handedly, when they got free from Soviet network, they became single country nuclear-free free state by their own efforts and by persuading all security members of the UN, Security Council members. So they established a very marvelous example of a single country becoming nuclear-free zone. And there are very small examples in Japanese cities, probably more than 30, I believe, that the city council has passed a law, passed a city, what do you call it, regulation that my city will be nuclear weapons free city. So, but of course it's not effective because the national government does not recognize that and the US forces just ignore these local rules. But still, these are tiny but very important examples. It's like a bud coming out from the ground, frozen ground in small sizes, but many places. But we have hurdles, deterrence strategy and the conflict in Korea, conflict in Taiwan Strait, and the militarization in South China Sea. We have to get over that hurdles first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis, and thank you for staying. So Corazon, do you have an answer for Patrick, or would you like that we try to get another question?
Well, let me just give a few words regarding there was this question about how in terms of relating with the parliamentarians or people in Congress. And I think coming from civil society and social movements, it's very important for us to be very vigilant in terms of trying to monitor the laws and the policies that comes out of Congress. It's also a big work to do in terms of providing information, and to be able to do that, research is also important. And so it's not. It is important to connect, to have a relationship with the parliamentarians, so that we can, lobby and find ways by which to influence the policies that they make. And of course, we have to be very prepared because there are historical moments in our particular location in our countries where we have the opportunity really to change the policy. I would say that, for example, for the Philippines back in 1986, we were able to push for the inclusion of the prohibition of nuclear weapons in Philippine territory, as well as the prohibition against foreign military bases unless there is a treaty approved. So these are things that that happen that we don't expect, but I think it is also important to be prepared with the information that we could feed to the parliamentarians.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fabros. So we started late. We started with 10 minutes delay, so I guess we can go for 10 additional minutes. Should you have questions, additional questions for Gary and Carlos and Fabros, because as we knew, Mr. Lee had to leave just before 8:30, and it's 8:30 CET. So would you have any other question, or shall I go through my own questions? Okay, then you will have my questions. Perfect. Gary, the first one, which will be the last one for you at least, is for you, and it's about promoting the peace dividend. What are some key arguments or narratives that parliamentarians can use to build consensus around the idea of redirecting military spending to social and development programs? And I would ask for a very short answer, if you don't mind, so that we can really finish kind of on time.
Well, I think being brief and quite practical, my mic, being brief and quite practical, I think when we look at these things in terms of a trade-off, what are the problems that we're having that directly affect the lives of our constituents? And those are human security issues. And how much can be done, whether it's education or unemployment or health or environmental issues and all. I think the focus of parliaments on that which really impacts the people is the strongest argument, and that which is going to gain the most public support for action by Parliament. So we don't have any evidence that more expenditure on military improves human security. We have an abundant evidence that reduced human security increases violence, conflict, and militarization because people are unhappy, and whether it's local violence or otherwise. So anything that can be done to focus on the root causes. Human security is the root cause. We don't have war in Europe for decades. I mean, within the EU, for example, it's unprecedented in history because the focus is on the human security of the people there and the recognition of the mutual benefits by a collaborative, you can say, human security arrangement. And that's the only formula that will be lasting when people don't want to disturb the peace because they thrive and benefit so much by it.
Thank you very much, Gary. And the last question, final, and again, I will ask for a short answer. The question will be related to the one I just asked Gary, and I guess that the answer will be equally related. And it's about redirecting military budget. Ms. Fabros, I mean, as a long-standing advocate for reducing military expenditure, what are the most common barriers you've encountered in shifting these funds to social programs, and how parliamentarians, to your, I mean, to the best of your knowledge, could address these barriers? Thank you.
Well, there is such a thing as disinformation, especially during these times, and if and the government will definitely be a party also to misinformation, so that in terms of the military, those those news or information that goes out to the public also influences the position of the parliamentarian. But we also say that the best way to really guard against that is really to establish a connection, not only with the parliamentarian himself, but usually the parliamentarians have researchers, have, what do you call it, speech maker. I don't know if that's the context where the others are, but sometimes it is even better to talk to their researchers and their, and their staff to feed them the information, so that the quality of the output of the parliamentarian is aligned towards the position that we would like them to take. Otherwise, they are going to get it somewhere else. And oftentimes, for countries like the Philippines, where the military have very strong influence in all of the branches of government, that's where they get information. And you can imagine what that will end up to. So that's, for me, the work of the social movements, the activists, providing them the real situation on the ground is very important.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fabros. And again, I mean, you've been touching upon different functions of Parliament, and this time it's really representation that you've highlighted. And it's the role of parliamentarians towards the population, be it to general citizens, but also to CSOs, civil society organizations. It's important for them to be able to really speak with the population. And I guess that the main outcome of this session is really that people need to speak. They need to speak to each other, because by talking to each other, they are building trust. And it's by building trust that you build peace. With these wise words from me, I will close this session. I would like to thank all of you for attending, and of course for sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much, and I wish you, I guess, a good afternoon, if not a good evening, given the time. Thank you so much.